Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host, Paula Taylor, and this is episode 106. So I have a couple of brief announcements before we start tonight. My next in-person sacred sound bath is Tuesday, August 23rd. That's at Brightway Wellness in Tucson from 6:30 to 8. And then I'm doing an in-person Intro to Dimensional Frequency Expansion class. This includes the Emerald activation, which is the first layer of DFE. It's a really loving, powerful activation. And that will be on Sunday, August 28th from 2 to 4 at BioTouch Healing in Midtown Tucson. You can head to Paula Taylor Energy and register for either one of those or read more, learn more about those two offerings. And then I just want to mention that virtual sound baths on Zoom are coming. I think the first one's probably going to be sometime in September. So I will keep you updated because I know some of you aren't here in Tucson. So when I make these announcements, you're probably like, oh, what about me? Things are coming. The virtual space is going to have more offerings. I do offer the Intro to DFE class virtually. So if you're interested in that, you can always reach out to me. You can contact me through the website. You can send me a message through Facebook. Generally, if I have enough interest, I will book a virtual class. It's just been a while since I've had a lot of time to kind of put one out there and see if anybody signs up. So if you're interested, let me know. The way these classes kind of work is that you end up sort of in a group, and that seems to be as it's meant to be. I have a couple of groups that are progressing through the layers. My original DFE goddesses are now up to and through selenite, which I found out you do the activation twice. That was a channel download that came to me. And then I've got a group that's moving on from amethyst to onyx. So anybody can take the intro class at any time. There's no obligation to go on to any of the classes. It's just a great way to learn a little bit more about dimensional frequency expansion, the potential it has for kind of making changes in your energetic field. And that's probably a good segue into what we're going to talk about tonight. So tonight we're going to talk about spiritual awakening and trauma release. And if you look back over the last probably 3 months of this show, we did a bunch of shows about spiritual awakening. I did a little bit of a series on spiritual awakening. And then all of a sudden we kind of transitioned into this trauma-based fears series. And we did 6 shows on trauma-based fears. And I want to talk a little bit tonight about how these are related, why this is important. Because you might think, if I'm in a spiritual awakening process, do I have trauma to release? Do I need to, quote unquote, lower my vibration to this frequency of trauma if I am expanding and growing and learning how to not dim my light? And the answer is yes. Trauma release is going to happen continually if you are to awaken spiritually. So I want to talk tonight about why. I want to talk a little bit about the energetic field and how trauma release actually facilitates spiritual awakening. So we spent, again, 6 episodes talking about trauma-based fears. We've done 1 trauma healing episode so far. So this is in that trauma healing series. And it could just as easily be entitled, Why is it important to heal trauma if I am to spiritually awaken? That's kind of the question here. Why do I have to do this? What does it matter? And it's important to note that a lot of people who get into this spiritual process, who step onto a spiritual path, are people who have already done quite a bit of trauma healing. I always use myself as an example just to kind of make things more concrete. And so I started in therapy when I was 19 years old. I'm now 44. I did about 3 to 4 years of pretty intense therapy. I have a background in psychology. I have a degree in psychology. It's sort of been an interest for most of my life. And so I've been doing this kind of trauma healing, trauma release process for years. I've also been on a spiritual path since I was about 16. And there is no coincidence. It is not a coincidence. It is a synchronicity that my spiritual path and my trauma release kind of led me to the same person. And I've talked about my mentor who was my therapist many times on the show. And I don't think I realized kind of why this was so important until recently. So I have been doing this work for many years. I help other people. I hold space for other people who are doing both trauma release and spiritual awakening because it happens simultaneously. It's not like you have to do one before you do the other. But what I am discovering and what we talk about on the show so often is this idea of spiritual excavation, of layers. So I think this realization that I had recently, so I did all this awakening work and I really grew and got so much more expanded, and all of these amazing gifts started coming in that I had been blocking for years. And the reason I had been blocking those gifts was because I was still holding frequencies of trauma in my energetic field, in my body, that were actually blocking this energy from getting through. The vibration of fear can pretty powerfully block the vibration of love. So these intuitive gifts, this intuitive information that comes through holds that vibration of love, and trauma holds the vibration of fear. So I had this huge awakening and I was in this really amazing place, and I've been listening to old episodes of the show. I started all the way back at the beginning. I think I'm up around 40 or something now, and I kind of jump around a little bit as needed. But what I've noticed is there is a distinct pattern that I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in, of having this huge kind of awakening, this opening, this increase of my feeling of being connected to that intuitive guidance, that is swiftly followed by a little bit of what feels like a slide backwards, a little bit of a kind of what feels like a reawakening of fear. But what I have realized by looking at this pattern, by understanding that it is a pattern, and then in these last kind of couple months of the show, what I've come to realize is that we don't ever really slide backwards. Maybe a little bit. But what's happening is that we're doing this excavation, right? So as we excavate trauma, we dig up trauma, we bring the frequency to our awareness because it's held in the physical body. It's held in the energetic body, which is the same thing as the physical body. We've talked about that a lot on the show. Sometimes I actually use those terms interchangeably. Energy is held in the physical body, and there's energy, there's physical energy, there's emotional energy, there's mental energy. All of this is held in the physical body. So what happens is that we excavate this frequency of trauma, we discover it, we bring it to awareness. We have the opportunity to release it, and then we have this big, beautiful awakening, this big, beautiful opening. And sometimes it feels a little bit like, oh, I'm done with the trauma stuff. Like I've arrived, right? I've made it. And it's a beautiful feeling, and absolutely treasure that feeling when it comes around. But know that this is a cycle. So what happens is we have this big, beautiful opening and awakening, and we celebrate that if we're aware of it, which is awesome. That's one of my favorite parts of this work. There's definitely a high that comes when you have one of those kind of breakthroughs. When you excavate this trauma, you release it, and then, you have this big, beautiful awakening. But then there's another layer to excavate. So after a little bit of a honeymoon period, if you're still doing this work, sometimes it feels like we've slid backwards because all of a sudden it's like, oh, and the trauma's back. But it's not really back. It's the next layer of trauma that's underneath the previous layer that we excavated. So we excavate trauma, we release it, we grow and expand, and then we have to do it all over again, which sounds a little bit daunting. And there's definitely, you've heard me talk even recently on the show about being a little bit burnt out, about being a little bit uninspired, about just like you absolutely sometimes get to a place where you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. I just want to rest. And that is always appropriate. Taking a break, taking a rest. If your body is calling for rest, if your mind is calling for rest, sometimes your mind will trick you and call for rest. So it's actually best to trust your body, because your body has a direct line to that intuitive information, even when you're not aware of it. So when your body is telling you to rest, listen to your body. Sometimes your mind will be like, oh, you should take a break. And that can get into a little bit of denial, actually. You know, your mind will say, don't go there, don't go down that road, don't do that excavation, because it's threatening to the ego, and that's what exists in that mental space. But when your body's like, ugh, I just can't do this anymore, I need a break, sometimes you'll actually get sick. You'll actually start getting symptoms if you're not listening to your body, if you're not recognizing that kind of call to rest. Emotionally, you'll start feeling kind of just kind of like nothing, numb. That's the emotional word for it. You're not having ups, you're maybe having a little bit of downs, but it's just kind of like nothing feels quite right. So it's appropriate to rest kind of at any time in this cycle, whenever you feel called to rest. But recognize that it is a cycle. Recognize that as we excavate this trauma, this frequency of fear that we're holding, which, as we've talked about in all of these episodes, it could come from your childhood, it can come from any time in this lifetime. It can actually come through your ancestral line. It could be a trauma that happened to one of your ancestors that you're not even aware of. And if you believe in past/future lives, it could be something that's coming in from kind of another facet of your soul that's experiencing a different lifetime, which in linear time to us feels like it already happened or it has yet to happen, but time really isn't linear. So I just saw a video today about somebody talking about how they have memories of being in the future, and I thought that was pretty mind-blowing, and I totally believe that could happen, just like we can have memories of a past life, because time really isn't linear. So let's talk a little bit about what this trauma does in the energetic field. I'm not sure, we've gone into this a little bit, but this is what actually kind of inspired me to do this show. I did a short TikTok on this, and I thought, there's a lot to unpack there. Like 3 minutes in a TikTok is probably not enough about this. So first of all, there's just awareness that this is a cycle, which we've just talked about, right? We excavate trauma, we find these frequencies of fear, we release them. As we've talked about, that release cannot just be in the mental space. It has to be done in the body, energetically, through some sort of movement or body work or energetic movement or sound, whatever calls to you. And what I find is that different frequencies of fear call for different things. Sometimes I need to move my body. Sometimes I can just bathe in sound. Sometimes I need to make sound. Sometimes I need to go and get help and go get energy work from someone else or a massage or both or some kind of combination. So part of this process is learning what tools work for you and learning how to apply the tools. That's why I developed that whole process that we talked about months and months ago about spiritual tool building. So you have to know what tools are going to work in what situation. And sometimes you need help for that, especially at first. You gather all these tools and then you got to figure out, like, how do I use this tool? When do I use this tool? What if this tool's not working? So you don't get frustrated and quit. But why do we need to release trauma in order to have a spiritual awakening? That's essentially the question that I wanted to talk about in this show. How are these two things related? And we've talked a little bit about this cycle, right? But why, how is trauma getting in the way of this spiritual awakening? What's actually happening functionally in the energetic field? And what's going on is, as I've said, we hold these frequencies of trauma, of fear, in the physical body, in various places in the physical body. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Pretty much anywhere in the body, you can hold it in your joints, in your muscles, in your organs, in your viscera. Pretty much anywhere in the body, you can hold trauma. We're holding trauma, a ton of trauma in the mental space. And then that emotional, kind of spiritual space sometimes gets stuck. It gets stuck with trauma. There's holding in the body, there's stagnation. We've talked a little bit about some of these terms. I don't want to go down too much of a tangent because I want to focus on kind of explaining why this is important. So we're holding these things in the body. That's what trauma is, holding fear, wherever it is, in the body, in the energetic field, in the mental space. So what is awakening? What is spiritual awakening? Awakening is recognizing, finding that divine light that's within us, feeling the connection we have to that source of all that is, developing that intuitive link that allows us to get information that's beyond the ego mind, to get that intuitive information that comes to us from a soul level. So essentially, awakening is really letting go. Awakening is allowing the energy to flow and move the way it's meant to. And we can't do that when there's a lot of holding of trauma in the body, in the physical and emotional, energetic, mental bodies. The trauma essentially is what's covering up that light. We did a whole couple of shows about dimming our light and cleaning our lighthouse, right? So the gunk that's on our lighthouse is that trauma, is that frequency of fear. To the point that sometimes we don't even recognize that we have the light anymore. And we certainly don't see it in other people when we can't see it in ourselves. And what happens when we're in that state, that's that triggered state. So we start reacting. We're not responding. It's just a knee-jerk reaction to things. We're getting emotional. Sometimes we don't even understand why. We're snapping at people. We're feeling fearful. We're isolating ourselves. There's all of these real-world repercussions that happen when that layer of trauma is so thick that we forget about that beautiful divine light that is really who we are underneath the trauma. So essentially, in order to reignite that light, to reconnect with that light, because that light does sometimes get kind of dim, it never goes out. Sometimes we don't see it and it could still be kind of shining brightly. A lot of times what happens is the more trauma, think about if you pile, if you have a fire and you start piling too much stuff onto the fire, sometimes the fire starts to smolder. It'll almost go out. Our light can never go out, but it can get to the point where we don't even feel it anymore. We don't recognize it. We don't remember it's there. So the way that trauma release is connected to spiritual awakening is that trauma release is necessary for spiritual awakening to happen. Releasing that frequency, that vibration of fear that comes out of trauma that's held in the physical, emotional, mental bodies, energetic bodies, makes space, makes room for that beautiful light and love to flow back in, for us to recognize, oh, that beautiful light that we call in every week in our meditation, that's really just me. It's not really outside of ourselves. We kind of call it in because it's also all around us. And so sometimes it can be easier to feel like you're calling that in from another place rather than igniting it from the inside. And we can call it in from anywhere in this physical plane, from anywhere in that intuitive, energetic plane. And then it does reignite our light. And so these two processes actually go hand in hand, because the more we reignite our light, the more we stoke that flame, that actually has the power to burn away that frequency of fear that is trauma. So it's almost like a chicken and an egg thing here, right? Like what happens first? These things help each other. They inform each other. Trauma release allows for greater spiritual awakening. Greater spiritual awakening absolutely allows for more trauma release. And pretty soon it's a little bit like a snowball rolling down a hill. When you first start this work, whether you started in therapy and you were in that mental space because you wanted to feel better, because that frequency of trauma was making you feel fearful or angry or sad or depressed or anxious or all of those things together, or you started in a spiritual way, like, there's more to life and I feel like there's something missing from my life. That's a lot of times how a spiritual journey starts. Or maybe you started them kind of together like I did. The first step in that process feels like a giant leap, because you're at that hill and you got to start the snowball rolling, right? You got to start kind of pushing it. But then as it starts to roll and it gets momentum, pretty soon there's actually a flow to this process. And that is what I have found by noticing this pattern in myself and listening kind of to the shows and recognizing I do this in a flow. I've been doing this for such a long time now that it happens in a flow. And the more I allow that flow to happen, the faster it happens. To the point that sometimes, I could release like 15 traumas in a day or something, which is good because unfortunately there's a lot of trauma out there. There's a lot of trauma that happens to us every day that we don't even recognize as trauma. And as I've said before on the show, sometimes, our ultimate goal is to kind of process in the moment, right? So we're not collecting this trauma anywhere in the body. But for most of us, that is probably not a state we'll attain permanently. We'll attain that for a while, being in that flow. Somebody cut you off in traffic and you're just like, whatever, it's fine. I just let that go. And then maybe 2 days later, somebody cuts you off in traffic and now that's in my right shoulder. So as we do this work, the work actually goes faster. It goes easier. And that's not to say that we don't sometimes come up against a huge issue. I've talked on the show about changing my own core belief issues, which are these kind of things that feel inherent. And one of my big ones, and I think probably just about everybody has issues with self-worth. It may present in different ways, but pretty much all of us have issues with self-worth. And the more we can reconnect with our light, the more we can shine that light and stop dimming it and stop letting fear control it, stop letting those frequencies of trauma allow us to stay small and dim, the more that light grows. The more we can face the bigger traumas and the bigger fears and those core beliefs, the more momentum we have to start changing the way that we actually think and the way that we feel about ourselves. And when we change the way we feel about ourselves, we change the way we feel about the world. When we change ourselves, we change the world. I've said that many times. If you are in flow and you are a happier person because you feel fulfilled, because you're doing this spiritual work, because you're shedding trauma frequencies that have been holding you back, that is reflected in every single experience you have. It's reflected in the relationships you have one-on-one in your life, in your close personal circle. It's reflected in the relationships you have in a social setting, in a work setting. The ripple effect cannot be overstated here. That doing this work on yourself ripples out in a way that changes the entire world. And you will notice as you do this work, if you're in a good mood and you're flowing, like the world is your oyster, right? I keep bringing up traffic, so we'll just keep going with that. Like, ooh, there's a little spot that opened up in traffic, or like this drive usually takes me 15 minutes and today it took 7. That's the kind of stuff you start noticing. And that is because you are in flow and the world is reflecting that back to you. When you're in kind of that trauma frequency, that fear frequency, when things aren't going well or you're not feeling good about yourself, that starts getting reflected back to you. People start cutting you off in traffic, or you get stuck in a traffic jam and you thought you'd be there in 10 minutes and then it's really 25. So this work, as I say very often, has very real world consequences. My life is totally different now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. Everyone's is, because we went through a pandemic, but because I keep doing this work, and because the rate that I'm doing this work actually accelerates, because I think I started incorporating so much sound into the work, that kicked this work for me into high gear. It was like jumping into hyperdrive, or whatever they call it in Star Trek. I should know that. I am kind of a Trekkie. I'll admit it. Star Trek: The Next Generation. I was raised on that. And man, what a beautiful way to view the future, as a peaceful place where people work together. If you're feeling low, watching a Star Trek will usually give you a little bit more hope in humanity. That's one of the reasons I like it. So in tonight's meditation, we're going to work on trauma release for spiritual awakening. But we're not going to get into any specific trauma. The trauma part of this is actually going to be very small, very short, because we want to get back into that awakening. We're doing this work of releasing trauma. We talked about how much trauma affects our lives. But as I've said often, sometimes my favorite thing about energy work is that we don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of what's there. We can release energy without even understanding why it was there in the first place. Now, is it important to understand our patterns so that maybe we don't gather that energy and hold it in the future? Absolutely. But sometimes it's nice to just have a good clearing. So we're going to have a good clearing in this meditation. We're going to do some joyful awakening work. And we're just going to have fun with this. That's one of the messages that I keep getting, is to have more fun, to have more play, to find pleasure in the things that I'm doing. And so let's do that in tonight's meditation. Let's meditate together. So find yourself a really comfortable position. If you'd like to lie down for this meditation, that's completely appropriate. If you prefer to sit up, just make sure you're sitting in a way that you feel really supported, that you feel really safe. You might get all cozied up with a blanket or a stuffed animal or something that brings you security and safety, that feeling of security and safety. Close your eyes, take a few nice deep breaths. I encourage you to take those beautiful deep oxytocin breaths, breathing in through the nose and then sighing that breath out with an audible ha. Vibrating that vagus nerve, telling the body that you're coming into this mode of safety. If you prefer, you can just breathe deeply in any other way, but do take a few deep breaths here, 3 to 5, maybe 6 or 7. Let yourself start to feel heavy and relaxed and comfortable. And then draw your energetic sanctuary to you. If this is a new practice, just imagine that you're sitting in the safest, most beautiful place you can imagine. This is your special sanctuary. Nothing can harm you here. It is completely safe. No one can enter this space without your permission. This is an entire planet that is yours and yours alone. So as you sit in your sanctuary now, just notice how you feel. Maybe you need to move your body a little bit to get more comfortable. Maybe you're just looking around and noticing how safe and joyful you feel to be back here in your sanctuary. And I want you to start moving in your sanctuary now. You can move in your physical body if you'd like, or you can just imagine some movement. I want you to start spinning, and you're in this beautiful place and you're kind of spinning just like you did when you were a kid. You're spinning in circles, you're laughing, you're enjoying it. Maybe you fall down and lay on the ground for a minute or two. And as you're spinning here, you don't get dizzy because this is an energetic practice. I suggest if you're doing this physically, maybe you just do a couple of spins and then go into that intuitive space. You can move your hand as I am just to kind of get that motion of spinning into your field. And as you're spinning here, just like if you were spinning when you were wet and drops of water were flying off you, this frequency of trauma that you're carrying, whatever frequencies you're carrying, you don't need to know what they are right now. They're flying off of you like drops of water as you spin. And as you release these frequencies of trauma into your sanctuary, they're instantly absorbed and transformed into unconditional love, because this is a space of unconditional love. So as you spin here, you're just releasing trauma. And you can, if you prefer to do a different kind of movement, you can stop spinning. You can actually move in your physical body, as I am a little bit. I'm just kind of moving my hands back and forth. Sometimes moving your physical body is a great way to get that energetic movement going. But just keep picturing now, you're in your space, you're moving. Maybe you're just full on dancing now. Maybe you stop the spinning. But every movement you do flicks another drop of trauma frequency off of you. And start to notice that you're feeling really good here. You're grooving out. Nobody's watching you, so it doesn't matter how you look. Maybe you hear some beautiful music playing, something that really brings you joy. you're just dancing, you're letting this trauma go. You don't have to get pulled into any of these traumas. You don't have to know what they are. You don't have to think about the memory of this trauma in this particular meditation. You're just flicking it off you. And you can even kind of flick your fingers in the physical plane here to represent that you're flicking this frequency of trauma, of fear, out of your energetic field to be recycled for the highest good. So just continue doing this for a few more moments. You're just releasing as much trauma as you can in this moment without judgment. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Even if you release one tiny drop of trauma, that's one less drop of trauma that's stagnating in your energetic field. So just slowly now kind of let this movement resolve on its own. Maybe you're just now kind of flowing a little bit instead of flicking that trauma away from you. And just for a moment here, notice how you feel. Notice how your body feels. Notice how your emotional state has shifted. If it's shifted, if not, that's fine. Maybe you feel a little bit lighter and freer. Maybe you've got a little bit of a smile on your face. And maybe you notice no change, and that's okay. You can repeat this as many times as you'd like. So I want you to come totally still now, both physically and in your space. Just for a moment, we're actually going to do some more movement, but just for a moment, maybe you sit down in a meditative space here in your intuitive, energetic sanctuary. Maybe you're just standing still for a moment. I want you to take a nice deep breath. We're going to use a lion's breath here. We're going to breathe out by sticking our tongue out and making a loud, almost roaring sound. We're going to do that 3 times to release any remaining trauma. Breathing in, breathing out through an open mouth. Stick your tongue out as far as you can and make that lion's roar. Really let all that breath out as much as you can get. And one more time, breathing in through the nose. Letting go of any remaining frequency of fear that you've been holding. Anything you can release today. And now I want you to begin to move in this sanctuary again. And allow this movement to be much more flowing. Maybe you're dancing around. Maybe you're flying and soaring around through the sky in your space. Maybe you're running and sort of holding your arms out as you feel the wind on your body. Just let this be really free and intuitive here. This is that intuitive connection, that growth of your beautiful divine light, that recognition that that light wants to grow, that it wants you to feel it, that it wants you to let it shine. So as this light begins to shine more and more brightly, you can visualize this as a sun or a light bulb that's glowing from the center of your chest. Let that light bring you into some intuitive movement. And maybe you're moving physically a little bit. Maybe you're just in this visualization, allowing your intuitive, energetic movement to happen in this beautiful, energetic sanctuary. You're flying through the air. You're weightless. You're swimming. Just let this movement be really beautiful and flowing. And as we step into some sound here, focus on allowing this beautiful light in your chest to continue shining and growing. Maybe you're just a complete body of luminous light here. Allow this light to move you intuitively in whatever way is calling in this space. Just continue to grow and expand and awaken here. Sashe otaye sanate o shaye sashe. Feel yourself getting bigger and bigger energetically here and brighter. This light is burning away any remaining frequencies of trauma that you're holding now. So she ata sashe no se shatea yatea yatea sashe. Oh ya se o she ya Dea Shea So She Hose Shata Ye Sashea Taye Shate O Shea Tashea. Getting bigger and brighter and more luminous and beautiful here. Let yourself really expand. Let yourself move through this beautiful sanctuary, knowing that you're connected to this divine light that is the source of all you are. Daye so shaye sa daye hoya seyo shaye toya shea deya wa shea haye no shaye asaye. Feel yourself reach this peak of light, this peak of growth and awakening and expansion here. Burning away any fear, stepping fully into love, even if it's just for the last few moments of this meditation. Let yourself really feel this awakening. Let yourself really feel this expansion. Let yourself smile here. You deserve to feel this light. You deserve this connection with your beautiful divine light of source. Let yourself glow. Let yourself glow so brightly here. You deserve this. You are a being of luminous light and joy. Let yourself feel that joy if you can for just a few moments here. Even if you had a hard day, no matter how much trauma you feel like you're carrying, you have the opportunity, even if just for these few moments, to completely let it go, to completely step into that awakening of that glowing, beautiful light of unconditional love, that fierceness, that strength of unconditional love. That is your birthright. That is what you are made of. Stay here as long as you like. If you're in a safe space and you'd like to fall asleep in this beautiful expanded state, see what kind of beautiful dreams you have. If you're coming back to your conscious mind, to the rest of your day or evening, just slowly start to come back. Keep that beautiful brightness, that beautiful feeling of awakening and expansion if you can. Keep that beautiful smile on your face if you can. And just slowly start to come back into your conscious mind. Bring that expansion and light and love into the mental space where so much of this fear tends to reside. Let this light shine out from the center of your brain, of your mind, just like it's shining out from the center of your heart. Let this beautiful light illuminate all of your thoughts as you move forward. Let them be thoughts of love, thoughts of expansion and growth and awakening. As you're ready, you can start to slowly move your physical body, just reaffirming that you're still here in your body, that you're back in your mind space. Maybe stretch your head or your neck, move your arms, shrug your shoulders a few times, wiggle your wrists and hands and fingers. Sat Nam. The truth of your identity is that you are a luminous being of light and love. Even in those times that it's hard to feel it, that is the truth of who you are. Take one more nice deep breath if you'd like, and affirm with me, out loud if possible. I am fully present in my body. I am fully present in my body, and I allow myself to easily release trauma and fear. I am fully present in my body, and I recognize the luminous light of my soul. Take one more deep breath. Move your body one more time if you'd like, and then as you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Come back to this practice. It's a powerful one. Listen to the show a couple times if you're called to. Start to see that pattern in your own life and recognize that as you step into flow, you will move through that excavation so much more quickly and with less effort and more joy. Have a beautiful rest of your evening and a luminous rest of your week, and I will see you next week for Wind Down Wednesday.